Welcome to the EZCODE Projects series maze video number 2. In this video, we'll begin by adding to our maze generator function so that it builds out a matrix for our maze. If you have not done so already, please complete the previous EZCODE Projects maze series videos. For those of you that have done so, let's begin. Just a wonderful reminder that all you have to do is type as I do. Just pause the video or slow down the speed when needed to catch up. Understanding comes later. Just make your own version now that you can play with later. There will be lots of JavaScript in this projects series, so hold on to your keyboard. Let's begin. Open the maze project directory in VS Code. Go to Explore, open folder, find where you keep your EZCODE projects, select maze, and open. Now assure that the code.js file is open. I have mine open here to the right. And note that we've already created the empty maze generator function in the last video. We also called the function in the load function above and passed in an empty div to the maze generator function. Let's start as simple as possible. If we recall, in the previous setup video, we reviewed that the maze was a series of rows and columns of a fixed number. In the video, it was an 8x8 cube. We could just hard code those values, but let's instead make our maze a bit more dynamic. Let's create two constants at the top of our EZCODE module to contain the columns and rows. So just a note, here is our maze generator function we made. Here's where we're calling it. And if you recall, we already have the view container set up from our template from the setup series, and we're just going to append a div on to that view container that we're going to call the maze element. So that's the parent element, and now we're going to start creating the children of that element. And we just pass it in. After appending it, we just pass it into the maze generator, and it will become the element. So at the top of the file, let's go ahead and create two constants. The first one is going to be columns, and that's going to equal 8, or at least how many columns in each row. And the second one is going to be rows. And guess what that's going to contain for now? That's going to be 8 as well. We're going to make an extra space, just clean up our mess right there. And now we need to start our maze by building row by row and adding columns to each row. So we're just going to move down into our maze generator function, and we're going to type out quite a bit of information here. So we'll try and explain as we go. So the first thing we need to do to build our matrix out is to loop through and build the most outer portions of it. So we already have the maze, and what we want to do is append more divs to that maze, and each one of those divs is going to be a row. So to do that, we're going to need a value back. So we're going to name that already, and it's going to be called the maze rows, and then we're going to equal, and we're going to move to the second part of this, which is now we need an array to iterate 8 times, or at least the amount of rows that we have. And so we're going to do a known kind of trick in JavaScript land, which is what we need to do first is we need an array of rows. So if we pass this in and we have a class called array, what are we going to get from that? So what we can do is first test it out. If you ever have an idea, you go to the browser, you go to the console by opening the inspect, and let's just type in what we just did. Now we don't have the rows constant, so we're just going to say array, and we're going to hard code our 8 in there and enter. And what we get back is something like it shows to be an array, and it has empty times 8. So it has a length, but I don't see anything inside of it. In fact, if I tried to do this where we wanted to do a for each, and we were going to iterate over each piece. It's not going to, actually we'll just do console log here, and we'll console log the I. Either way, we can see it should have happened 8 times. We should have seen 8 undefineds, but that's not what happened. So that's the second part of this, where we actually have to create, although it looks like an array, it's really just a number 8 again. So we're going to say array from array 8. And if I do this here, you can see that there is a difference between just having the array 8 and the array from array 8. In this case, we do have items that are in the array, and we can see that it's undefined. So that's okay. We don't care too much what the value is in the array. We just need the array to iterate 8 times. So that's going to give us the ability to build the loop for the row, and we're going to see this same thing with the columns. So let's go back to the code.js, and let's continue what we're doing here. So I'm just going to go find the beginning here, and we're going to say array from the array class that JavaScript gives us. So we have an array class, and we have a method called from on it, and we're going to pass in the array class itself with the rows. Now, again, when you see this, you just have to know what it does when you see array from array rows. And you're going to use this often when you need to do something like do this so many times. And so now we're just going to dot notation, because it's going to return an array, and we're going to use map, which is another method on the array, and we're going to open that up, and this time we're just going to put row and our let's just get this on the same line. So keep those together and give them a semicolon. So this is completed with the function. I could even do this on the new line if I wanted to. I like to keep mine left to right, top to bottom. So we have a map, row, and then we have the opening brackets as well as the closing parenthesis that's on the map. And from here, we can start building out what we think a row would be. So just like anything else, we're using JavaScript to build the HTML structure. So we're just going to make a row of divs, as we mentioned before. So let's go ahead and say we're going to say we have a constant, because it's not going to change. It's going to be a row div. It's not going to change during the iteration. So as this goes through a count of 8 every time, each time it loops through it, it's going to create a new row div. It's not going to reassign it. It's just when you're in the loop, when JavaScript's in the loop here, each iteration of the 8, or the number 8, each time it iterates over it, it's going to be a new assignment. So we have a row div, and just like anything else here, we're going to create the element, and it's going to be a div. Now we have a row. Now what do we need to do with that row? We have to add the columns to the row. So we're just going to do the same thing we did before. So I'm just going to go up here, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to come down here, and we'll just paste it in there. Give me a little bit of space, and let's go to the end, and we're just going to let's get the brackets correct before we do anything else, semicolon, and we're just going to go in the curly braces and open it up. So same thing again, but this time we have to label it a little bit differently. So in this case, it's not maze rows. It's going to be column divs, actual divs from the DOM, and we're going to say array columns, because it could be different. So we have our columns from up top, and this time the first element is going to be, which again, it's just going to pass in 8 undefines. So we're not really using column, but we're going to put it there just to open up our function, because we're going to need to do something later. Now we're going to get inside the column and get, you know what, guess what we're going to do? Let's just go back up here again, and we're going to copy copy paste our row div, and in this case we're just going to call it, just like we did before, let's just call it column div. And yep, that's good. And then we're just going to enter into a new line. And in the map function, it's very important to always return the value that you want to have in the new array. So you'll notice if we do an array.forEach loop, we're just iterating over the array. We're not reassigning any value. The for each doesn't return anything but undefined itself. So not every array method returns something. Map does. It returns the iterated elements of the array into a new array. So we need to return the column. Actually, that'd be column div. And then just a few more pieces here. Let's just go down. Let's see, we have column divs. We have our column div there. We return it. And now inside of, so I'm just going to go right here and enter a couple times. So we're still inside of the rows array now. And what we have to do is take the row div, because each row gets 8 columns. And so we have to say, okay, row div, which is an element from the DOM, so we can use the DOM methods, and we're going to say append. Now, what we've used before, if you go up to line 14, you'll remember even from the setup template series that we had append child, which would append one item. The append method of a DOM element can take a bit more, it can take something different. So let's just check that out real quick. A good resource for any JavaScript, we're just going to open this up here and we're going to say MDN for Mozilla Developer Network. And we're just going to say append and hit enter. And I've already been there. You can see the link. So Mozilla Developer Network, fantastic documentation for JavaScript, and we can just see the method, the element.append. Method inserts a set of node objects or strings after the last child of the element. Strings are inserted as equivalent text nodes. All right, we don't really have to understand exactly what that is. So we'll go down here, and it does say the difference between node append child. So the append allows you to also append strings. We don't need that. Whereas node append child only accepts node objects. We're going to send in a node object, which is what it's calling for a DOM element. Append has no return value, whereas append child returns the appended node. We don't need that. Dot append can append several nodes and strings, whereas append child can only append one node. That's what we need right there. So it's even showing in the example, you can give it 1, you can give it 2, or you can give it many. And this is just a way of saying, hey, 1, 2, I don't know how many you're going to put in there. Whatever the param number is, this is what param n is. You can dump in 1 billion. They just have to be comma separated like this. So the second part is, how exactly are we going to do that if we have a dynamic column count? We could hard code, each item, array 0 index, array 1 index, array 2 index. So there's one more thing that we're going to need, and we're just going to go to MDN again, and we're going to say spread syntax, and here we go. Let's see what it has for a number. So it has sum, and it has x, y, and z. Now if you had an array of x, y, z, and what we needed to do is spread them out, no matter how many there were. Let's say the sum could take also a param n, so it could be x, y, z, comma, infinity, comma a, comma b, comma c. We don't know how many it's going to be. In the case of sum, it does, but just imagine we're back at append. We don't know how many we're going to have. We need the array to expand in a way that it turns into the arguments for the function. So here's the example, 1, 2, 3. Just imagine we have however many nodes. We have 8 nodes, and we need to spread them out. And we're going to use this right here. So it's an operator, and it's ... You'll see that throughout JavaScript. There's a lot of different ways to use it. And we're just going to exit out of here. Once again, Mozilla Developer Network, MDN, look up your function name, and you can find all kinds of information about it, as well as other resources like Stack Overflow. if you need to ask questions on what you're doing, or you can leave those in the comments. So let's go back down here and we're going to go to the code.js. So we're going to take our array, which was column divs, and we just need to add the spread operator. So it's just going to be like this. And then at the end, let's give our semicolon. And then we're in a map function. So what did we do before for the map function? That was very important. Enter new line, and we're going to return the row div, because now we need that to be, now that it has all the columns, we need it to return itself back to this map function to become part of the maze rows. So we have what might look like a complicated builder here. This is a typical pattern. We have parent-child type relationships, building certain items and then bubbling up to, you know, the parent container, whatever that is. In this case, it's maze rows. So one last thing that we need to do outside of this is, what are we going to do now with maze rows? So let's get out of maze rows right here, and what we can do just to see what that might be like, we'll just console log it too, and we'll see this is maze rows. I do like to console log just to make sure the structure looks like what I thought it was. And we're also going to do one last thing. We're going to take the element from the maze generator function, which was the maze container that we passed in right here, and we're going to say element append, just like we did before, but now we have a series of rows. So we're going to use the spread operator, 1, 2, 3, and we're going to say spread out the rows and semicolon. Now let's save our work and refresh the browser. And we'll go to the browser and refresh. Oh, and we forgot one more thing, or I forgot one more thing. Let's open the file. And we're in maze source, the view HTML. That's the file that we have to link to the browser. That's going to load all our JavaScript. And here we go. We have our console log that we had open. So we have maze rows. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 divs, just like we thought we were going to have. And each one of those divs is a node element. So we'll close that up for a second here. And note that there is nothing showing in the browser. So over here. So let's, in the developer console, let's select the Elements tab. And let's see if we can see our HTML, the maze generator created. So here's our view container from our setup template series. We're going to open that up. There's our maze div that we started with. Okay. Now let's open that up, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rows here. All right. These are the rows. And then in each row, yes, it looks like we have 8 columns. Not much to them, but the structure is there. So this is great. We can see there are 8 rows and there are 8 columns in each row, but we can't see any of it on the screen. So let's give some width and height to one column in the browser. So just select, let's select the first. This is the maze, this is the row, and this is the column. We're gonna select that and just go over here to element style, and we're gonna type in, let's give it a height of 30 px and a width of 30 px. We're just trying to make boxes here. Okay, so it looks like I got that right. Now we're going to come over here and we're going to hover, and note the cell now shows up when we hover over the element. So that's what we want. Each one of these doesn't have that applied yet. So how do we apply style using JavaScript? Because that's what we're going to do. We're not going to use the CSS file for this. So we have the style there. Let's go back to the code.js file. And let's think about this for a minute. How are we going to go about this? Because we have the ability now to make a dynamic maze. And what if we had the ability to make dynamic cell width and height? So let's go ahead and create 2 constants again at the top of our EZCODE module. So we're just going to go up here right below rows, and we'll just give a little space between the 2 types of thought patterns here, and we'll say we have a column underscore and we're going to go height, and then we're going to say, now this wouldn't be a number like this was because it has px in it. So we got to make a string, and it's going to be 30px, and then we're just copy paste this, and we're going to make it row. I'm sorry, that is column. I'm doing the wrong one here. This is column width. And let's see, did we spell everything right? Column, it looks like we did, and we have 30px each. All right, so let's go back down to our maze generator function and see how do we attach that. So in this case, we need to attach it to the column, not to the row. So it's right around line 31. And here we have an element called col_div. So let's go ahead, and now we can do something with it because it's been defined. And once again, if you needed to know what the properties of a node element are, we can use the MDM network website, but we already know. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to say style. So that kind of makes sense. The property is style. And what's the name of the property? Well, it was height. So in this case, we're going to equal, and of course we're going to have our column height we just created, semicolon, and then we're going to do the same thing again, and we're going to do style dot width. There it is, and we're going to say column width, semicolon, and then we're just going to break out there. See how we're separating the thoughts that we're going through in here. If it was all together, it gets kind of jumbled. So we've separated. We create the div, we add some style to the div, and then we return the div. Now, while we're at it, let's also add the following properties to the maze div and then to each row. So we're going to go up to the beginning part of this here where we're creating this div, and we're going to add some style to it. So again, break down to just give a little padding between what the maze, or the creation of the maze node, and we're going to say maze style dot display. And just from our other series as well, we use Flexbox often, so we're going to say this is a flex container, the maze itself, and we're going to add another set of styling to it. So this is a bit different. It's the same thing. We're trying to assign a property. However, in JavaScript, it has no problems with keys that are strings, but when we call them, we can't just say, because in this case, I need flex direction. And using it in this sense, JavaScript's going to crash. It doesn't allow hyphens. It does allow underscores. So if we did this, that's fine. But this, it can't do. So what it has to be in the form of a string. So to do that, we're going to get rid of the dot. And just like an array, we can do that for an object as well. We have to use the array brackets, but really what we're just saying is in style, look for this property, and the property is going to be a string. So flex direction, that's how we can call properties that have characters in there that don't match the appropriate JavaScript requirement for keys. And so we're just going to say equals, and we're going to say column, because that's the direction that we want. We want the rows to stack one on top of the next one. We don't want it to go in a row, which is the default behavior for Flex. So now the next part is we're just going to go back down here again, and we're going to assign one more thing to rows, because we want rows to also be a Flex container, and the default Flex direction is row. So we don't really have to do much here besides we're going to take the row div and say style, because these are all just DOM nodes. And here we can just say display, because it doesn't have inappropriate characters. And we can say flex, semicolon. Okay, now let's save our work. So we got the unsaved changes here. We're going to save it. That's going to disappear. And let's go back to the browser and refresh. Go back to the browser and we're going to refresh. Now we can see that the columns and rows are now confined nice and neat in a box. So let's hover over these things and we can see, once again, here is our view container, which has the maze. So we can see there's our maze, and we said display flex direction. So let's just get rid of column for a second. And you can see the natural behavior is to make it a row. We want it to be stacked. So there we go. Another way to know if it's a flex property besides looking it up is if you take away flex, you can see flex direction is now gone because it's not, it's a property. Flex direction is a property of flex. So here we go. We have them stacked like we want, and then we have a row. So here's a row, and it's doing the display flex just like we wanted. And here, each item is in a row. So if we go to the next, or it's inside the row. So here's the next row, and then the columns, and then the next row, and the columns. So this is great. So nice job, everyone. We've built out the base of the logic that will govern our maze within the confines of our dynamic matrix that we just built here, that we can say, hey, let's make it 16. You know, let's make it 20. Let's enlarge it or shrink it, whatever we want to do. We have that ability now. And in the next video, we'll add some outer walls and a unique index to each of our matrix cells. If you've enjoyed this video, click the like and then subscribe buttons to get notifications of new content. Thank you for exploring programming with me, and I'll see you in the next video.